I feel like a refugee from the island of Dr. Moreau. Some twisted character from a Celine novel. The hot sauce helps.
Welcome to Meet the Bloggers. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and that man you were just watching is John Cusack. Of course, he's actor and filmmaker. He's starred in such box office hits and favorites of audiences such as Say Anything, Grosse Point Blank, High Fidelity, Con Air, one of my favorites, Being John Malkovich. Maybe one day they'll do a Being John Cusack. Right now he's doing another movie. He's in Vancouver for the filming of 2012, but he's going to join us right now, taking a break from that, to talk about his movie that is coming out on DVD release right now. That's War Incorporated, and it's about profiteering during a time of war. So it's perfect for what we're going to discuss today. John, welcome to Meet the Bloggers.
Thanks for having me.
I know, we appreciate you doing this. So I got to ask you, war profiteering and comedy, how does one come up with that? It doesn't seem like a natural fit necessarily. How did that jump to mind for you?
Well, I think that, you know, when you look at the kind of the carnage of the last 7 years, you know, it's been so horrible that I think if you don't put sort of an absurdist lens on it, you couldn't keep looking at it, and you might not ever get out of bed. So sometimes I think, you know, comedy is supposed to be about serious stuff.
You know, John, they talk about free markets, then all of a sudden Halliburton happens to get all the no-bid contracts. That wasn't.
I mean, so you know, as we looked at what was going on there, you know, you could see for 7 years the Bush administration has, you know, has transferred massive, all the public money into private hands, you know, through cronyism and theft and all these various things, and now at the very end of their administration, they actually want to, you know, the gorging was so intense that you know, they've created all this bad debt, and they want to transfer now the bad debt back onto the public. So they're all socialists on the way down.
If you had to tell the American people something that you thought they didn't know about this war profiteering or the privatization of the Army, what would that be, John?
Here, these private armies are out there doing work, totally unaccountable to any part of our checks and balances. They investigate themselves. They're not accountable to any branch of government. They basically use the State Department as an ATM. And you know, in whose name are they allowed to shoot anyone? What were they doing in New Orleans? What were they doing in Katrina, in the disaster zone? Who were they?
It seems like
who were they protecting?
It seems like the worst of all worlds for us, John. I mean, we pay for it. We get no accountability. They basically work for ExxonMobil. So one asks the obvious question, why are we doing this? Why are we agreeing to this?
The vision of government of George Bush and Ronald Reagan and this whole ideological movement, you know, you can see all this spin on it. What their whole mission is to hollow out the government and hand it over to corporate interest. If all these companies are getting no-bid contracts and the CEOs are kind of, it's a revolving door through the State Department back to the corporate CEO boards. It's like you don't know where the companies end and the government ends and the companies begin, and it all starts to blur.
And
so,
we see that in the bailout too. I mean,
yeah. So another point of the movie was actually, you know, saying, you know, look, you should either make money from the defense industry, or you should be able to make policy, but you can't do both. And it seems to me that that's all blurred.
It's exactly what we're seeing in the bailout too. The guy who's in charge of handing out the $700 billion is Hank Paulson, who was a former CEO of Goldman Sachs. When he goes to buy out AIG for the government, he's got the current CEO of Goldman Sachs in the room with him. Now he's put somebody in charge. We found out earlier this week. And guess what company that guy is from? Goldman Sachs.
Goldman Sachs.
I mean, Goldman Sachs is running the Treasury Department.
And this is not new. Back in Iraq, when Bremer was rewriting, well, while the place was literally still burning, and he rewrote all the laws, giving 100% ownership of foreign companies into Iraqi state-owned assets. One of the Bush proteges or errand boys was out there giving speeches to Iraqis, saying, you know, protected markets or never succeed. You know, we have to have a totally free market, right? And he was, I guess, completely oblivious to the fact that they had a, you know, it was all crony capitalism. It was all going to Bush's favorite corporations, coming in and literally just taking Iraqi state-owned assets, no bid. But they would give these speeches with a straight face. So they can all, if they talk about these free markets, none of these people are interested in free markets. I mean, it's the biggest lie in the world.
If I'm watching at home, I feel the frustration coming through, right? I'm frustrated, you're frustrated, the people are watching are frustrated. How do we break through? How do we change the way that this is all set up so that it serves us again rather than serving these corporate interests that are so intertwined in the government?
Well, you know, I don't know, but I think the answer is you probably have to support candidates who are, number one, willing to talk about it. Like there's a candidate from Florida, Alan Grayson, who won the Democratic primary. Jan Schakowsky has talked about it a lot. And I think probably to put as much pressure on the Democratic Party to do what their duty is within the Constitution, which is to be a check and balance to the executive branch. So, you know, Nancy Pelosi says impeachment's off the table. What gives her the right to say that? I mean, I don't think she has any right to say impeachment's off the table.
Given their record, it's a little hard to have faith in the Democratic Party.
Right. So I think you have to put as much pressure on Obama as you can to make him talk about these things and deal with these things.
Right, but that's what I was going to say. If Obama wins and they have these large majorities in the House and the Senate, as it looks like for the moment being that they're going to, do we then have some hope that they're going to press these issues, not necessarily in terms of payback, hey, because that money's gone. You know, the guys from Lehman and Goldman Sachs and Blackwater in the war profiteering and KBR, they took it, and you're never going to get it back. But as far as fixing it for the future, do you have some faith and hope that if we do get these large Democratic majorities and Obama as president, that we will be able to push forward on some real change?
Well, I was very heartened to hear when he said that, you know, when Senator Obama said that he would be open to prosecuting people for crimes that were committed during the Bush administration. I thought that was very important. That was the first time I've heard any of the national figures say that. And I've also been encouraged by him saying there'll be plenty of time to figure out who's to blame for this after we get past the crisis. So to me, that means that there'll be some accountability. In my opinion, if there's no accountability for any of this, then there's no way it'll change.
You wake up November 5th, John McCain's the president. How do you feel? I mean, what do you think the chance of us changing the war profiteering or the privatization of the armies, et cetera, does that all just get flushed down? Is that over?
Well, I'm not even convinced the Democrats will take it on. But if McCain gets in, God only knows what'll happen. I don't know. But if McCain wins, that means that the press and the public stood for 30 days of race baiting and smears, and that once again we rolled over. And I think that you know, Senator Obama is going to have to fight back and meet this force with some heat, because it seems pretty clear that they've been reduced to basically race baiting to try to win the election.
It certainly seems that way, and I have some faith. I have some faith in the American people that it's not going to work this time. They've gone to the well too many times, but we'll find out.
I sure hope so.
We'll find out in about a month. John Cusack, thank you so much for joining us on Meet the Bloggers. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right. And everybody, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back to Meet the Bloggers.
This brave nation was founded by those who went against the grain, by people who saw the need for change and stood up. Join us for a series of conversations with people making a difference. Tell us about the young people who are making tomorrow's changes. This Brave Nation at bravenation.com.
Welcome back, everybody. Now it's time to meet the bloggers. I feel like a game show host. Time to meet the bloggers. All right, behind door number one, Liliana Segura. She blogs for Alternet. She's been on the show before, of course, talking about Afghanistan. We're going to talk about Afghanistan again today. Liliana, don't you worry about that. We're going to get to that in a little bit. Also, behind door number two, Marcy Wheeler. She, of course, blogs as Empty Wheel on Fire Dog Lake. Guys, welcome. We appreciate your service to the show here. I want to salute you. And Liliana, I want to start with you. Look, what's wrong with this picture? Why is no one in the campaign talking about war profiteering when it seems like kind of a giant issue to us?
Well, I think that partly it's a question of the candidates not wanting to bite the hand that feeds them. I mean, both McCain and Obama have received hundreds of thousands of dollars from the defense industry. Actually, surprisingly similar numbers for both candidates. The Center for Responsive Politics in June released a report that had them both at around $300,000, which is actually not a lot of money. I think the more fundamental question, though, is that both candidates are pretty committed to a military policy going forward that's going to bring, additional need for defense contractors, for reconstructive, for the kind of work that ultimately leads to the kind of war profiteering that John Cusack's film addresses and that we've seen since the invasion of Iraq.
What's going on here, Marcy? Why is our system set up to privatize more and more of essential government functions, including defense at this point, which is considered the #1 essential function of the government? Why have they set up the system to continue to do this?
I think there's a number of reasons, Cenk. One is obviously the Republicans have been in charge for so long, and they just want to get everything out of government, even if it costs more and is less effective to do it. I think it's also kind of Keynes on crack cocaine. This is what's driving the growth of our economy right now. The only plus factor we have, the only growth area in our economy is all of this military stuff. You know, Afghanistan, Iraq is really pushing at least one sector of the economy that is still doing well. And so, you know, without that, we'd be really sunk. We'd have no manufacturing in this country that's really expanding. And then, I mean, I think finally, these contractors are paying a lot of politicians. And so there's a plus side for the politicians. They don't want to go after it too hard, because if so, they're going to get knocked off the gravy train and they're not going to get reelected.
See, Liliana, is that it? I mean, you were talking about that as well. Is this basically a merry-go-round where they say, well, we'll give you the private contracts, and then the private contractors turn around and give the money to the politicians, and so the politicians don't want that gravy train to end, so they give it back to the contracts to the private contractors in times of war and other situations as well. Is that how it works?
I mean, I think absolutely that's how it works, and one of the only disincentives for continuing that is, being confronted by an American public that is outraged and horrified and liable not to reelect politicians when the degree of waste and fraud becomes clear. Now, what's been a problem is that we've gotten so used to these sort of sporadic reports of billions of dollars in lost reconstruction money, or KBR's famous embroidered towels, that they were charging incredible amounts of money for. I mean, these stories come out, and there's sort of these moments of outrage, but there's not a sustained pushback against this, and it's very difficult to know how to do that in an organized way. So,
well, that's a fundamental question, Marcy. Let me throw that at you, because of course Liliana's right. I remember in 2005 they come out and say, oh, by the way, we misplaced $8.8 billion. It's just gone, lost. And Bremer says, well, it's hard to do accounting in the middle of a war. We can't have Western-style accounting in Iraq. Well, actually, you were in charge of it, Bremer, so that doesn't make much sense. But anyway, and then the anger or that issue kind of dissipates a little bit, and then the contractors go back to getting their money, the politicians go back to getting their money. So how do we break this cycle?
I think there are two questions. One is, first of all, how do we raise these issues among the press? How do we make it into an issue that everyone, I mean, I was looking at the hearings that Henry Waxman is doing this week with the executives of AIG and of Lehman, and people are pissed. People are watching that, and not just you and me, but even the congressmen are going, you did what kind of retreat with our money? And for some reason, that's not happening on the military side. And I think one time when it did was with Blackwater, because you had this person, you had Eric Prince, who's rich and, you know, very tied into Republican circles. And, you know, you've got to kind of personalize these people who are getting rich off of it. And when $9 billion just disappears in Iraq, we don't know who to, you know, go after with our pitchforks. But the other, I mean, that's looking backwards. And that's why I think we're not able to do something about all the money that's already been wasted and lost. But looking forward, I think that we need to achieve some kind of structural change. I mean, going back to what I just said, that we need to culturally say, you know what, it's better when the military performs these military functions. It's better when Homeland Security performs Homeland Security functions. It's better, I mean, whether you like intelligence or not, it's better when our intelligence professionals perform those duties and not people who are getting paid 5 times as much and slinking money off to someplace out of the country. And so I think it's a cultural issue. That'll change a little bit if we do well in the upcoming elections. And there are individuals coming in, hopefully like Alan Grayson in Florida, who will really push that. But it really also, I think, needs to come out of this economic crisis. The Republican ideology has been proven to be dead and empty and wrong. We really need to step into that and say, you know what, government serves a function. We need it to serve that function, and we need to not be embarrassed that there are things that government does better than private contractors.
Marcy, I agree and disagree. Let me quickly, my disagreement is I want to look back, and it's not for, oh, I want to go get, you know, settle old political scores. It's because if we don't look back at what we did wrong, we can't fix it going forward. It's like that's the Republican mantra. Don't look back, don't look back. It's like we're leaving Sodom and Gomorrah, and if you look back, you're going to turn into ashes or something. Well, we got to look back to see what, I mean, $9 billion. Where did that money go? I want to know where it went so we don't repeat the same mistake. But you're right in looking forward. So let's look forward a little bit. Liliana, let me go to you about what happens if John McCain wins. You know, we had this mess in Iraq. Now the Afghanistan war is growing bigger and bigger. Are they just going to do the same exact thing they did to us in Iraq, in Afghanistan, these war profiteers and the private contractors?
Well, I mean, considering the fact that he's talking about repeating that, you know, magic formula of the surge in Afghanistan, saying it worked in Iraq, it's what's led us to victory in Iraq, although the last time I checked, we haven't achieved victory in Iraq. Absolutely. I mean, if you're talking about escalating a war in Afghanistan, then you're talking about bringing in more of these reconstruction forces and seeing the same kind of fraud and abuse that's already taken place in Iraq. I mean, last Friday, an American contractor was indicted for fraud and abuse, and I don't know what other counts, that's doing reconstruction work in Afghanistan. So I think that, I mean, it's a direct correlation, and absolutely, if John McCain wins, this is a formula we're going to see repeated. And unfortunately, the same is true of Barack Obama in the sense that, I mean, he's the one, and he often credits himself with being out front on saying we need more troops in Afghanistan. So, I mean, that's just the unfortunate fact. I just wanted to add one thing, though, going back to the question of these hearings. And, you know, when I watched Eric Prince testify before Waxman's committee, I mean, I think it's very important that these hearings are happening and that they continue to happen, absolutely. But, I mean, it was actually quite distressing to watch those hearings because here was the man who had been, I mean, this was in the wake of the Nisour Square massacre, where 17 Iraqi civilians were killed, and it was clearly this criminal act, I mean, according to the U.S. military. And they had Eric Prince sitting there in the hot seat and just were utterly unprepared to ask him tough questions in any real way. And what happened after that, I mean, he essentially got away with murder and with being able to sit there and say, oh, any deaths of Iraqi civilians have been accidental, you know, it might have come from ricochet bullets, and you know, sort of saying all of this nonsense and it went unchallenged. So I think that the hearings need to continue to happen, but there needs to be, I mean, they need to be better prepared for them, and something needs to happen beyond them.
So that leads me to my next question, Marcy, which is, hey, if the Democrats do get in charge, we have these big, you know, majorities in the House and the Senate, as it looks like if the election were held today, we would, and if Barack Obama wins, are we really sure that we're going to have real hearings where congressmen actually get mad, as they did with the AIG hearings, and say, hey, listen, we can't continue down this path. Looking forward, we've got to change the system. I don't know. From my point, I'm not convinced that the Democrats are going to do that. But certainly a lot better than the Republicans. Should I have some degree of hope, given what's happened in the past, that they will go in a better direction, they will have the hearings, and they will straighten out these situations if the Democrats do have these big majorities?
better, but not great. You're still going to have most of the same people leading the same committees, with the hopeful exception that Joe Lieberman will be bounced out on his butt, and we'll have somebody leading Homeland Security that will actually hold hearings on the same kind of stuff happening on Homeland Security contracts. But the other thing we'll get an AG who's not guaranteed that he won't get the administration and their close friends in trouble. I mean, you to some degree, there's only so far you can go with hearings, and you have to start prosecuting these people. This DOJ, whether it's been run by Gonzalez or by Mukasey, really hasn't been pushing that. And the other thing that's going to happen, at least in Iraq, is the Iraqis aren't going to let us go scot-free legally anymore. And even within the United States, the House side did pass a law that was going to make it harder for contractors to escape all legal scrutiny at all. It didn't pass the Senate. When we get a couple more people in the Senate, I think you're going to be able to see more of that kind of legislation passed. So we'll have a little bit better legislation. We'll have way better DOJ. We'll have a better president. And that'll mean it's an improvement. It's not perfect, though, and it's not good enough.
Yeah, Marcy makes great points there. The difference between an attorney general who thinks his job is to cover the president's ass, especially when the president has done all these wrong things, and an attorney general who's independent and actually looking to do work for the American people and to seek justice would be a tremendous change, as would getting rid of Lieberman in the Oversight Committee in the Senate. So I'm very curious to see how these next 2 years go. Guys, stay right there, because we're going to take a short break now, and when we come back, we're going to discuss the issues of the day and what's happening on the campaign as well when we return on Meet the Bloggers. Hi, it's Cenk from Meet the Bloggers. If you like the issue we're discussing this week, you can find out so much more about it on our partner blogs. HuffingtonPost.com, Alternet.org, ThinkProgress.org, JackandJillPolitics.com, OfAmerica.wordpress.com, and TheYoungTurks.com. We blog about the issue before and after the show, so you can check it out all week long.
Hi, I'm Kate Shepard, and you saw me on Meet the Bloggers. I'm the political reporter for Grist.org. I write their Muckraker column. I wish that people were as hyped up about energy policy as they are about the new Facebook. And if you want to know more about these issues, check out Grist.org.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. Now I want to go back to our bloggers. Marcy, I'd like to start with you. What are some of the hot button issues on the campaign right now?
I think there are two issues. First of all, I think the John McCain campaign has officially jumped the shark. They released a web ad today connecting Bill Ayers to Barack Obama. That's not something they've kind of done in print so far. I mean, beyond Governor Palin going out and repeating it at these big kind of overheated rallies. But in spite of his own ties to the Contras, in spite of Governor Palin's ties to a separatist party in Alaska, they're trying to stake their race on, calling out the racists, trying to fearmonger, and it's really pitiful that this is how John McCain's going to end up. But I guess that's where he wants to go.
I would like to play a little game with the audience. 6 degrees to Bill Ayers. I think I can get to Bill Ayers in 4 degrees, maybe even less, maybe 3. I can go through Obama. I know Josh Orton, who worked on Obama's campaign, who obviously was on a board with Bill Ayers, so that's actually only 3. I think I could do it through McCain as well. I knew the dean of the Annenberg School at Penn, who knew Annenberg, who gave $50 million to Bill Ayers' board. Oh, is that 2 degrees? I don't know. I think I'm doing all right. But I'm sorry. I denounce and reject myself for any connection to Bill Ayers. The whole thing is absurd. Now, we're going to focus on the issues. Liliana, let's go back to what's happening with the Department of Justice that Marcy was talking about during the last segment. Here we have the courts saying, hey, you got to let these 17 Uyghurs go. And I'm always in favor of letting the Uyghurs go from Guantanamo Bay. And DOJ says, no, of course not. Tell us what happened there.
Yeah, basically, this was a historic and unprecedented move in which I believe it was 2 days ago now, a U.S. federal court ruled that these 17 innocent prisoners who have been at Guantanamo Bay for now almost 7 years who are Uyghurs. They're members of this ethnic minority and who would face prosecution or persecution rather, and possibly even death, were they to be returned to China. So the order from the court is that they have to be allowed into the United States, and so that's unprecedented and hugely significant. And so what happened was that this order came down. There are already communities in the United States that are getting ready to take in and help support these innocent men. And as of, I believe it was God, I'm getting the timeline all wrong, but what happened is that the DOJ Mukasey basically turned around and released a statement saying, on national security grounds, due to our concerns that they're still enemy combatants, we're not going to allow this to happen. They've successfully managed to block this court's order that these men be released into the United States.
Marcy, real quick, is the first dude in some degree of trouble with this Troopergate investigation of Sarah Palin?
Boy, he sure should be. Just last night, so Wednesday night, they released his affidavit, which he gave to the good investigator, the one who was actually paid by the state. And he basically said, yeah, I tried to get this guy fired, but oh, I'm not too involved in Sarah Palin's administration, I promise. I think there's going to be a lot, I mean, this report, Branch Flower is giving out his report basically as this goes to air, as this program goes to air. And I think there's going to be even more problematic issues than just the fact that Todd Palin's kind of this spook who keeps trying to get his old former brother-in-law fired. But, I mean, this is happening really as we speak.
All right, thanks, guys. Come back next week, Friday, of course, at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. And until then, go out there and do something.
This is the first war ever to be 100% outsourced to private enterprise. Tamerlane soldiers, Tamerlane tanks.
What's my cover?
Trade show producer.